Chris Biderman, Candlestick Chronicles, also covering the Kings for the Sacramento Bee. And Chris, it looks like you're in NOLA right now, enjoying some good food. What's going on out there? How's the weather?
The weather's a little bit hit or miss, but yes, I am in New Orleans. I had a phenomenal lunch yesterday and went to Kashan Butcher. Shout out to my guy Nick Wagner, who's always recommending that one. But probably my favorite sandwich I've had anywhere in the country. I've been around a little bit. So if you make it to New Orleans, check out Kashan Butcher. If you're into sandwiches, I had a porchetta cheesesteak, and
Hey.
really, really tough to beat that one there. So.
Okay, it sounds like it. Well, I'm glad you didn't lose your lunch after watching the Kings last night against the Pelicans. Just give us your initial take. What the heck happened?
Yeah, I mean, it was a second night of a back-to-back. It was third game in 4 nights, and obviously that's not an excuse. The energy was certainly low, but they didn't defend Zion Williamson worth a lick. The guys after the game had mentioned, not double teaming him quickly enough, not showing him enough different looks, and so I would imagine, given that they have today off, going into Wednesday's game, they're going to try to up their physicality, maybe double team him a little bit more, prevent him from just getting downhill and getting to the rim like he did. But he's, Zion's not. The Kings aren't the only team that Zion's a tough matchup for.
Right.
They just, his physicality and his size and his power is just really difficult for them to handle. So they'll have to vary their looks. They did something in that game that I thought was interesting. Talking to members of the coaching staff, they were going to throw some wrinkles at New Orleans, and that included playing zone. Because they wanted to take advantage of New Orleans, not having a ton of outside shooting. And ultimately what that did, it just allowed Zion Williamson to have a bunch of mismatches. And you saw a bunch of, Kevin Huerter, for example, having to guard Zion at times, and Zion just seeing that and putting his head down and getting to the rim. So I would imagine the Kings are going to have a much different approach when it comes to defending Zion, but they're certainly not the only team that's going to struggle defending him this year.
Yeah, Chris, what did the vibe kind of feel like after that game? Did you feel like it was more frustration or was it disappointment, if there's really a difference in those emotions? Like what did you really feel from just everybody coming out and doing their post game?
Yeah, I mean, they were realistic about it. They understood it's kind of a tough point in their schedule, and they're at a point now where the injuries are really starting to stack up in a way that they never really did last year. So that they do have to deal with the adversity. The vibes weren't great, but it wasn't like, the sky was falling. They still feel like they can go out and have a good stretch here, have a good finish to the road trip with New Orleans on Wednesday, and then the in-season tournament game in Minnesota on Friday. So the vibes weren't terrible. They acknowledged that they needed to play better. Particularly on the defensive end. And obviously they didn't have a whole lot of energy on the offensive side either, which I guess, should be expected in the third game in 4 nights as game 4 of a 6-game road trip. So I would expect them to bounce back and put together a better overall effort on Wednesday. And I think, the Pelicans came into last night ranked 26th, both offensively and defensively. And so the Kings are a better team right now than New Orleans as currently constructed, particularly with them missing CJ McCollum. But with Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson, they do pose mismatch issues, and the Kings will have to adjust, and we'll see if they can do that tomorrow.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the Pelicans were just underperforming.
Mm-hmm.
And, we just got word, I think it might have been in Zion's post-game press conference, that they had a team meeting after that loss to the Timberwolves over the weekend. Zion comes back. So it was a perfect storm. Excuses can also be reasons, and hopefully the Kings bounce back. Talking to Chris Biderman, host of the Candlestick Chronicles, also covering the Kings for the Sacramento Bee. To switch over to the Niners, Chris, they take care of business this weekend against the Buccaneers. Brock Purdy, perfect passer rating. We've heard time and time again, and Chris and I were joking around in the last segment about some of these stats that we've never heard of. Right? I mean, the stats that we have heard of, that Brock Purdy's doing really well, and Niner fans, being the fans that they are, finding every acronym stat in the book where Brock Purdy is number one. Brock Purdy right now has the 6th best odds to win the MVP. Do you think Niner fans should feel that Brock is being disrespected?
I mean, I think, there's a certain type of NFL punditry that's out there, particularly people ranking quarterbacks and stuff that, factors in physical traits maybe too much, right? Like you look at some of these rankings and you see guys like Justin Herbert and Dak Prescott and Kyler Murray, like all ranked above Brock Purdy. But the thing is, we talk about traits. Like, what about the trait of just like playing quarterback at a high level? Like, what about just getting the ball to the right guys, decision making, accuracy, timing, being, anticipation? Like, I think what Brock Purdy is proving to us that a lot of those physical traits that make the NFL Combine such a compelling piece of television in the offseason, like maybe some of that stuff is just overrated. And even what makes the best quarterbacks in the league the best quarterbacks is how they play quarterback. It's not just Patrick Mahomes has a great arm and that's why he's considered the best quarterback in the league and he can throw from all sorts of different angles. It's because of how he plays quarterback. Like, we've seen lots of super talented guys flame out because they just aren't good at playing quarterback. And what Brock Purdy's doing is just playing quarterback at a really high level. And obviously he has elite skill guys around him. He's in a great system with Kyle Shanahan, and he has Christian McCaffrey as a security blanket / and a running game that's one of the best in the league too. So he's taking advantage of his situation, and it's odd to me that that's being held against him when you look at quarterbacks throughout the league. And I've said this before to you guys, like, just about every good quarterback in the league has an elite receiver and or an elite head coach calling plays, right? So it's like, it's a little bit silly to me to try to denigrate Brock Purdy because he was a 7th round pick, because he doesn't have the same physical attributes that some other guys might have. But if you watch him play football, he is playing the quarterback position just at an elite level, and all the numbers back it up. So is Brock? It's probably by a minority of the NFL punditry at this point, but I think anybody who watches football credibly and really knows what they're watching understands that Brock Purdy's playing at a really high level right now, and is a really big reason why the 49ers are where they are.
Chris, looking ahead to Thursday's game on Thanksgiving, the Niners are playing Seattle, and just watching the Niners, especially since they went on that losing streak, it just feels like the pass game is clearly their weak spot when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. How concerning is it that Seattle's over there and their receiving core is just it's incredible, and it looks like it's getting even better as they kind of slowly integrate Jackson Smith and Jigba. How concerned are you for the Niners secondary going against that Seattle receiving core?
Well, the thing with, in losing Talanoa Hufanga, he
Right.
was not known as a coverage guy. He just, he was somebody who could make plays around the line of scrimmage and be kind of a ball hawk and force fumbles and take advantage of quarterbacks' mistakes there. But he's not somebody who was going to, run with tight ends 30 yards down the field all the time or be able to cover speedy receivers. Like, that was just really never part of his game. So I'm curious to see what Jair Brown, what he brings from that standpoint. I do think he's probably more fit to be a coverage guy than maybe Talanoa Hufanga was. Because, I remember asking Kyle Shanahan after they drafted Hufanga how they viewed him, and if they thought he might play linebacker at some point. And Shanahan was like, yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. So that they didn't have him set for certain as a safety when they drafted Hufanga, which sort of speaks to maybe the lack of downfield coverage skills that you normally associate with the position. So, I think the key for the Niners is to not give up big plays, right? Like they do a pretty good job of preventing offenses from throwing the ball downfield. And the way they've been beaten is by quarterbacks who get rid of the ball quickly. And what you saw in Jacksonville was the secondary doing a really nice job of preventing the quarterback from getting the ball out quickly with sticky coverage. That allowed the pass rush to get home a little bit more, right? And you saw when Baker Mayfield had success in the second half of the game on Sunday, he was getting rid of the ball quickly, even though it seemed like he threw 10 interceptable passes that the 49ers got their hands on throughout the second half of that game. So, it's always going to be tough going to Seattle. We'll see how Geno Smith's health is. He took a really tough hit on his throwing arm on Sunday, and obviously it's a short turnaround. When you look at the Seahawks receivers, I would say that's a team that can throw the ball downfield, right? You think about DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett; those are like really solid downfield threats. Are the Seahawks going to have enough time against the 49ers pass rush to let those plays develop? I think that's going to be a big question, and ultimately that could be where the game is won or lost.
Talking to Chris Biderman, Candlestick Chronicles, also covering the Kings for the Sacramento Bee. Chris, thank you so much for the time. But before we let you go, we're asking all of our guests this week. You know, we had to ask a Thanksgiving question. Where are you at with turkey? That's number one. And number two, what is your number one side?
Big dark meat guy. I like,
Okay.
I don't need the turkey breast. I mean, we all have turkey sandwiches and all that,
Right.
thousands of times. Give me some dark meat. Give me a big leg. I'm good with that. Is gravy a side?
That's a great question.
Yes, I would say that. Yes.
So I'm definitely the type that pours gravy literally over everything.
Okay.
I love that.
So
All right.
if you, I would say like stuffing, potatoes, green beans, whatever. Like gravy's good on everything. Turkey, obviously. So I would say gravy is probably my favorite side if we're qualifying it as a side. If not,
I think so.
I would probably go mashed potatoes too if we're talking more traditional sides.
All right. Well,
That's
enjoy that, Chris. Enjoy it. And thank you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your time in New Orleans. Hey, I've been telling people when I went to New Orleans back in the day, I had some alligator. Don't be afraid to grab some gator before you go, Chris. Don't be afraid.
I've had it before. It tasted a little bit like chicken. I
That's
almost
right.
did it yesterday. I just didn't want to do it before the game and risk having something weird happen from a stomach perspective. So
Exactly. Thank you, Chris. Enjoy the holiday, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks. You guys enjoy Thanksgiving, and
we'll see you, Chris.
best to you and yours.
Oh, thank you.
Chris Biderman, host Candlestick Chronicles, also covering the Kings for the Sacramento Bee.